Sometimes you just slow down and you say, this story we're covering is really remarkable in many ways. You talk about a guy going from a presidential palace to a New York courtroom. So we have a closer look now at the rise and fall of one Nicolas Maduro. He really rose to power in Venezuela under the former President Hugo Chavez. And he first came in as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and then it was Vice President. So you go back on the timeline to 2006, right? So that's when Maduro becomes a name that we recognize, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then he's the Vice President in 2012. Chavez dies in 2013, and Maduro takes over, and under his rule, many in Venezuela have been subject to increasingly dire conditions. State Department says nearly 5.5 million Venezuelans fled during Maduro's first term in office. Roughly a third of the country's population facing serious food insecurity. And we've seen independent UN investigations finding evidence of repeated human rights violations that includes kidnapping and torture, execution of political opposition. Despite calls for his ouster both in and out of Venezuela, Maduro managed to hold power. In 2019, he held on to power in the election. Well, you know, the U.S. and everybody else pretty much that looked at it, certainly U.S. allies, deemed that that election was just a sham, and they accused Maduro of illegally claiming a second term. We go to March of 2020. That's when he was indicted. Narco-terrorism conspiracy during the Trump first term. Justice Department indictment accused of overseeing a massive and violent narco-terrorism network responsible for smuggling drugs into the U.S. Then 2024, Maduro claims his third presidential victory. This one also considered to be rigged, the election, and not recognized by the United States. Last year, 2025, Maduro back under the Trump microscope with Trump back in office. In September, U.S. launches Operation Southern Spear, and they target the alleged drug cartel vessels in the Caribbean and off the Venezuelan coast, and then we bring it to the present day. Just last month, the U.S. beginning to seize tankers allegedly carrying sanctioned Venezuelan oil, and once again in the process, ramping up the tensions between Maduro and the Trump administration, all coming to a head over the weekend, 3rd of January, when American forces in Caracas captured Maduro and his wife, brought them into American soil. Now they'll face trial. 13-year rule of Nicolas Maduro coming to an abrupt end in Venezuela. Now, let's check in with our NewsNation international correspondent, Robert Sherman, who's live for us in Puerto Rico today. Robert, good to see you. As always, what's the latest from the region?
Yeah, well, Connell, I mean, you've heard the president say that the United States is calling the shots here in the region. The reason that that's the White House's position, there's still 15,000 troops here in the Caribbean, troops and personnel. And we've seen these Ospreys taking off and landing throughout the day, so there's no indication that that's going to be changing soon. But with all this firepower here, that's why the U.S. says they effectively control the situation in Venezuela, no matter who ultimately is in power. On paper, Delcy Rodriguez was sworn in today as the interim president of Venezuela. Interim basis, according to the high courts, because they're still holding on to hope that there is a day that Nicolas Maduro returns. And that also changes the timeline for possible elections to take place in Venezuela as well. She has now put out a statement which is a bit more conciliatory compared to her initial remarks following that Maduro operation. I want to read for you what she had to say. She said, and I quote here, that we invite the U.S. government to collaborate with us on an agenda of cooperation oriented towards shared development within the framework of international law to strengthen lasting community coexistence. President Donald Trump, our peoples and our region deserve peace and dialogue, not war. We've seen her tone tempered down a little bit ever since President Trump gave this comment to The Atlantic when he said, if she doesn't do what's right, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. So nothing much to read in between the lines right there. Pretty stern remark coming from the president there. So that's the political element in Venezuela. But it's important to remember that when you have heads of state that are removed so abruptly, you often have power vacuums created. Single most important entity, most powerful entity in Venezuela is the military. That's headed up by the defense minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, who's been with Nicolas Maduro's side pretty much since the beginning of that regime there. He has remained defiant to the very end, insisting that they will resist the United States. That is the power dynamic to watch in Venezuela over the coming days, as you have an official change of the guard in Venezuela today. Still much more to come on all of this and much more to be sorted out, because these situations, can get very cloudy.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.